Okay, so for this particular question, one of the first things I'm going to do is I'm actually going to ignore the top part of the question. So I'm just literally going to put a little scribble through there. And now I'm going to try and pay close attention to what this question's actually asking me to do. So I'm going to try and pick out some key points about the question and areas around that. So the first thing I'm going to notice is that it's worth 3 marks. So I'm going to highlight that or circle that. Okay, and that leads me to think that it might be requiring me to write a developed statement, so a little bit more detail. Okay, so some of the command words or topic words first of all. So first of all, I can notice that the topic word is asking me about poor physical health and that's effect on performance. Okay, so no need to address those areas. So how much detail do I need to go in? Well, I can see that it's asking me to explain and give an example. So I'm just going to highlight that or circle that one as well. Okay, so trying to write a developed statement, the first thing it asks me to do is use an example to explain poor physical health. So the first thing I'm going to do is try and think about giving an example about poor physical health. The first thing that comes into my head about somebody with poor physical health is that they might have high cholesterol. So that's going to be my example that I put in there. So I've addressed the example part of the question. I'm now going to go into more detail to explain to make sure it's a developed statement. So the next part that's going to help me write a developed statement is I want to think about the impact that high cholesterol can have on my performance. So what impact does high cholesterol have on performance? Quite simply, one of the things could be I'm not able to run for as long. So that's the impact it might have on my physical health, on my actual performance on the physical activity. I can't run for as long. But there, I still don't think we've really explained fully to get the 3 marks and create a developed statement. So I'm going to think now about the reason why I'm not being able to run along because of my high cholesterol. Okay, so my reason is because I've got high cholesterol I can't run for as long. The reason for that is that's because my muscles aren't receiving oxygen because of the cholesterol. Okay. And I might just want to read over my answers just to make sure I've not made any mistakes on my spelling. Oh. Okay, so that's one particular example that then leads me on to an impact and a reason. There's different examples, but that's my one that I've gone for in this one. Looking at B2 on this question, but before we attempt that we need to have put an answer in that's going to allow us to answer B2 in B1. So Joe's made a lot of new friends at his rugby club, and I think this is I'm going to put a social benefit for this one, or physical activity. Okay, so again, same process as we went through in the last question, is we're going to try and highlight some key things about that question, command words, topic words, how much it's worth. So again, first thing I can spot is worth 3 marks, and that's really important because that's going to be thinking about developed statement. Okay, I'm then going to start thinking about looking at my topic word, which in this question is, I'm looking at self-esteem. So I know this question's to do with self-esteem. And my command word is to explain. Okay, very similar again to the last question that we did. Okay, so that means, brilliant, I've done a bit of work on another question. I know I can follow a similar principle or theory in order to get me 3 marks. So the first thing that we're going to do is give an example. Okay, so I'm going to draw or think about giving an example. That's my E part. So explain how starting to play rugby at a club could increase Joe's self-esteem. I'm thinking about a social reason for that. So my feeling is that is then being part of a team. So that's my example. should be sort of understanding what's coming next. So the next thing I'm thinking about doing is, I'm thinking about putting an impact. And again, if you're answering this question, you can be doing this in your margin just to refresh your memory. Really good to see. So the impact of being part of a team is that you feel good about yourself. And again, that's related to self-esteem. We know that that's got that feel-good factor. You might be sort of thinking about terms like serotonin when you hear that one. I feel good about myself. Okay, and then I'm then going to think about the third part of the question, which is the R part, and the reason. And the reason I feel really good about myself, because I'm part of a team, is that because I'm really, really simple, I'm able to meet others. And again, there's lots of ways you can get 3 marks on this question looking at the mark scheme. We're looking at then, we're just going to go straight into doing what we always do on all our questions, is we're looking at highlighting key things that we can spot. So again, first thing I'm spotting is it's worth 3 marks. So I'm going to circle that, I'll highlight it. Okay. Next bit is looking at topic words. I think I'm going to do first. So the first sort of topic is that I can see is that we're talking about initiatives and priority groups in the question. So I might highlight them. It's a bit sneaky, this one, because I like to be quite sneaky to some questions. This is a really good example of why we need to take time when we read our questions, is that we can also see that there's physical health in there, which is another topic. So that's just something we need to think about as well, because that's going to make it a little bit trickier maybe to answer this question or access 3 marks. Okay, so this gives us a good chance of knowing what we need to talk about. Next thing we're looking at is the command word. Okay. So the command word is describe, so I'm going to highlight or circle that one. Okay, and quite often in the past, 3 mark questions are quite often explains, but this one's obviously describe. It's a little bit different. So what do we need to do first? Okay, and we're going to go down a similar sort of principle of what we've done before. So when we see describe, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look to define something. So we're going to give a definition. Okay, and the thing that we're going to first of all try and define is one of our main topics, which is a priority group. So in my definition, I might give it a definition of that, or I might give an example of a priority group. Okay, so less likely to participate. Okay, and then going on to now, how do we then get the other 2 marks? So it's not quite the same as explain, alright, we're going down a different approach, but we are going to adopt a very similar approach to what we're doing. So if you remember before, we had E, I and R. This time we're going to go for sort of taking on the E part of it and giving an example. Okay, so less likely to participate, and an example of how that might then help to improve the physical health of someone is, it might help them drop their resting blood pressure, for example. So that's my example, a drop in resting blood pressure. That's the same as if the question said, give an example of how participation could improve physical health. Okay, and then the next question that we might be thinking about is, what is the impact that that's going to have? Okay, so what impact is it going to be if your resting blood pressure reduces? Okay, the impact could be that this might lead to less chance of a stroke, for example, so some form of disease related to blood pressure that might reduce the chance of a stroke. So again, in a describe question, we are looking to maybe give a definition of the topic word, give an example, and then give an impact.